Welcome back to the Two Blues podcast and to this season's first instalment of Loan Watch. This will be a weekly episode which we will be bringing you more updates on how the players have got on, who's played, where they've played. But for today, we are going to give a quick rundown of the 19 Chelsea players, the 19 senior Chelsea players on loan at the moment, where they have gone, what the moves mean. We're not going to go too much into it, but we are in the international break. Obviously, Premier League is back tomorrow, and we will be bringing you all the live match reactions as always. Probably a preview as well. But for now, let's get into it. 19 players on loan, 7 of them keepers, 5 of them in the Premier League, 3 of them to our sister club, Strasbourg. Let's get into it. So first up is a player who signed last year and who a lot of us thought would be our number one this season, definitely pre-Philip Jorgensen. Djordje Petrovic, obviously signed him from New England Revolution last year. It wasn't a significant fee. It was between 10 and 15 or 10 and 20 mil. Not a massive fee. Signed a 7-year contract with an option of a further year. And like I said, I thought he had established himself as the number one. I thought he was far better than Sanchez, passed the eye test. But, Enzo Maresca, not a fan. Instantly came in, said that Sanchez was probably going to be his number one and that they were looking for another keeper to compete with him. Don't know why he doesn't rate Djordje Petrovic. From what I've seen, I think he's better, safer hands than Sanchez, and arguably up there with Jorgensen as well. They're similar levels. I haven't seen enough from Jorgensen, albeit the fact he's only played a couple of games for us. I haven't seen enough of him to say that he is better than Djordje Petrovic. Petrovic, however, I would be more than happy to place my faith in, to put my stock back into. I don't, he didn't blow me away, wasn't particularly commanding in the box. I think his shot stopping was great. His distribution wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't a step down from what we were getting with Robert Sanchez. So that one is a little bit strange to me. Obviously, great that Strasbourg, a team who nearly got relegated last year out of League One, have bolstered with a good quality Premier League quality goalkeeper. I think Petrovic should and will be their starting keeper throughout the majority of this season. But, good I think is a good move for us to be able to, boost Strasbourg, help them out a little bit. He's obviously moved there alongside Caleb Wiley and Andrey Santos, both of whom we will get into in a little bit. But yeah, I think, I don't see him coming back to Chelsea. Unfortunately, the nature of the game, unless Maresca is sacked at the end or before the end of the season, and then Petrovic comes back into the fold and impresses the new manager. I personally don't see a way back into Chelsea for him, definitely not as a starting keeper. I think maybe to bring him in as competition or a cup keeper might be a little bit more feasible, but disappointed for him. Like I said, definitely thought that he had first team potential this year, and I would have taken him in the first team over Robert Sanchez if he were loaning one keeper out. For me, it would have been Sanchez. But moving on, and we'll kind of, a little bit unfairly so, but we're going to group the keepers because, as I mentioned, out of 19 loan players, there are 7 goalkeepers who have been loaned out. One of whom is Teddy Sharman-Lowe, who's gone to Doncaster Rovers in League 2. He signed a new contract in May with an option of an additional year, and then went to Doncaster in League 2. Ted Curd at Hampton and Richmond National League South. Last year, he was named in England squad for the Under-17 World Cup. So, great for him to get a loan move in a proper league, proper Sunday league in National League South. I think a lot of these, and I read quite an interesting article actually on the Chelsea website about sending goalkeepers to non-league and why we do have a preference for that. And I think they learn the physicality of the game so much better. I think players that have come through non-league and have played non-league understand what the real world and the real football is like, because a lot of these players, you're hearing, should players get more protection? If these players in the Premier League were playing in non-league, their careers would be 6 months, 8 months. They don't have the bones, they don't have the stones for it. And I personally think playing in non-league or playing in National League South, Isthmian League, that sort of level, I think is a massive, massive bonus for these young keepers. And obviously, he's only 16, 17, Ted Curd, so interested to see how much he plays if he does break into the first team this season. But, another one fairly close to home that we will be keeping a very close eye on. Eddie Beach as well, Crawley Town in League 1. Luke Campbell, gone to Hendon in the Isthmian League. And Gaga Slonina, Barnsley League 1. Now, Slonina, I'm going to have to do a little bit more talking about because he's already blown the Barnsley fans away. Listen, Gaga Slonina is my keeper for the future. I know we've signed this Mike Penders. There's quite a few. Penders. Where's Penders on this? Penders isn't even on the list. Maybe it's 20 loan players with 8 of them being keepers. I haven't included Mike Penders. Obviously, he did sign in the summer though and went back to, I think it was Genk. So yeah, 20 players, 8 of them goalkeepers. But Slonina for me is always the one that I've been rooting for. I've been very, very impressed with, and tenfold out Barnsley. He got I think in his first game, was a cup game, saved 2 penalties, got player of the match, player of the round in the Carabao Cup. I'm pretty sure he's been their starting keeper since then and made some pretty big contributions. I've seen some huge saves from him on the Instagram. I follow all our players very, very closely in terms of their social media. So yeah, I haven't watched any Barnsley games yet, so I can't tell you that his distribution's been fantastic or he looks, safe as houses, or they look safe as houses with him in goal. But from what I've seen, he's pulling off magnificent game-winning saves. I think he's a proper goalkeeper, and honestly, the Penders move didn't really make a lot of sense to me when we do have Slonina on the books, who's played for Eupen last season, is going to play for Barnsley this season, and you would have thought the natural line of progression, he'll be ready to play next year. Remains to be seen. He may well have to get a Premier League loan first. Obviously, Barnsley are only in League One. But it will be interesting, man. It will be interesting to watch him. And fingers crossed he continues in the vein of form in which he has started. But the last goalkeeper is obviously Kepa Arrizabalaga. And we've taken a massive fat fucking L there. No option to buy, no obligation to buy, nothing. Just a straight loan. I don't know who's covering wages. I imagine they will not be covering all of Kepa's wages, because I imagine they will be in excess of 150k a week. But I think that is one of 2 L's in terms of the loans that we've got out. There are very few that I would turn my nose up at, but Kepa to Bournemouth is a bit of a strange one, because yes, he'll play, but I don't think he'll do enough in a Bournemouth side to convince someone to stump up a lot of money for him. They're going to concede a lot of goals this season, regardless of who's in goal. So he's got his work cut out for him. I would much rather that he was allowed to play against us tomorrow. Obviously, he's not allowed, so unfortunately they're not going to be handicapped with him in goal against us. But yeah, interesting to see. I mean, I think it's a good opportunity for him to get himself back in the spotlight, because he will be their starting keeper. Like I said, they will face a lot of shots. They will likely concede a lot of goals. So he's going to be in the spotlight. He's going to get a lot of action between those sticks. But moving on to the defence, Alfie Gilchrist obviously made his senior debut last season, and natural line of progression. He's gone to Sheffield, Championship loan. I think he started, or he might have come off the bench on the first game. He played some part in their first game, and I've seen him. He's got a few minutes so far under his belt. I know we've only played 3 games or whatever it is, but it looks like he's going to be a fairly regular fixture of that Sheffield team. So really, really hopeful. Similarly to the kind of the non-league argument, really, really hopeful that will, beef him up, will strengthen him up. Playing in the Championship is definitely a lot more physical, and while the Premier League is technically superior to the majority of leagues in the world, it's far from the most physical, and the lower down you go in England, the more physical it gets. Dylan Williams, Burton Albion League One. That is a loan with a buy option, so not an obligation. They have an option to buy. Williams has been a youth player for a few years. Never really done anything. Unfortunately, it's always one of those names that we've heard on the periphery of kind of breaking through. He's had promise, he's had talent, but he's never really kind of been given the opportunity by Chelsea, or a clear line of progression by Chelsea. So fingers crossed he does well at Burton Albion this year, and yeah, fingers crossed they buy him. Fingers crossed he has a solid career. He is there with Ronnie Stutter as well, who has been reunited with former academy coach Mark Robinson. Stutter is a player, one of 2 players on this list that I'm going to be watching extremely keenly. He's played 105 minutes so far. No goals yet, but it is one that we will be watching very, very closely, because he's young, and to be playing in League One, I think he's got a lot of potential, but he's got his work cut out for him. It is a very, very difficult situation to be put into. Aaron Anselmino, Boca Juniors, going back to the defenders. Sorry, the only reason I skipped forward to Ronnie Stutter was because he was also going to Burton. But we will go back to the defenders now. Aaron Anselmino, who obviously was purchased in August for 15.6 million, has been loaned straight back to Boca Juniors to continue his development. Not too much to say. Listen, I love a centre-back signing as a player who was a centre-back. I love the fact that we are looking at up-and-coming centre-backs. We have about 20 on the books at the moment. but that's never going to make me say no to another good potential quality young centre-back. And Anselminho, from what we've seen in glimpses, looks fantastic. Obviously far from the finished article, very, very young. I think he only had a handful of games under Boca Juniors before we signed him, maybe 3 senior games, which is not much experience. Even for say 15 million investment, that's quite significant for someone with 3 games of experience. But be interested to see how he does in the Argentine Primera Division this year. Obviously, Boca Juniors is one of the better sides, so you expect them to do well and to go to the latter stages of the Copa Sudamerica or Copa Libertadores, whatever it is. Hopefully, we'll see a fair amount of Anselminho this season in Argentina. Trevor Chalobah. Premier League loan, Crystal Palace. Now, I'm not mad at this. There's no loan, there's no obligation, no option to buy, but I'm not mad at this because I do think I wanted the best situation for Trevor, which would have been a good quality loan where he can go and play his trade at a top side. I think he's injured at the moment, so he's going to miss a couple of games. He got injured in his first training session, so he's going to miss a couple of games, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes straight into the starting lineup when he comes back in. Obviously, did they lose Anderson? I'm 99% sure they lost Anderson, so that's why they went for him. But yeah, I can see him fitting alongside Gehi quite nicely. Obviously, both of them, Cobham boys, would be very, very nice to see him have a great season and then either come back to Chelsea next season and stake his claim for a depth position or stake his claim maybe for the centre-half role. If he's up there with Gehi, I think that has a potential to be a fantastic centre-back pairing. Not even just for Palace, just in general. You could play those two for England, personally, Gehi and Chalobah, if they're both on job. But I'd be interested to see how he does and interested to see how Chelsea handle that next summer. Will we look to, obviously depends on his form, depends how much he plays, but will we just look to cash in? It looks so, it seems so, and I would assume so. That's the way that it's looking at the moment. But it would be nice to think that the door is still potentially open, and I know Maresca closed the door pretty quick on him, but if he has a fantastic season and we're still struggling at centre-back, it's going to be difficult not to look at him as an option. So I would like to think that option is still open. But one player that the door is closed for is Bashir Humphreys, the only player on this list who is on a loan with an obligation to buy to Burnley in the Championship. It's a £12 million fixed fee with 2.7 million add-ons, so 14.7 mil, not a bad fee for Bashir Humphreys. And I believe we have either a significant sell-on clause or a buyback clause. Either way, and I've said this before, I think the best way of saying this is the chances of the players in our academy reaching the level we need them to is very, very slim. And it's not like, although it's far from ideal, it's not like we can't afford 40, 50 million on these players if we need to buy them back. So sending a player like Bashir Humphreys out to a club like Burnley to develop and to try and become the player that we are sure he has the potential to become, we are taking our risk, all of the risk, all of the downside. We're taking ourselves out of that equation, letting someone else do it, saying that we back him and we understand that fully well, if he turns into the player that we are expecting him to be able to, we'll go back in for him in 2 years and get him for 30, 40 mil. But the chances of him reaching that level, particularly at Chelsea when there are only limited positions available, very, very slim. So I personally think doing this and getting good fees for these youngsters, boosting their career, you're putting them into a good position. Burnley Championship, he's already played for Swansea last season on loan and was one of their better defenders, I think, personally. So Burnley, he'll slip right into that team, and I think that's a great, great signing for all involved. I think for Chelsea, good money. For Bashir, great opportunity to develop. And for Burnley, they've got a quality young player on their side for not a massive fee. Caleb Wiley, another player that was signed in August, 8.5 million loaned out to Strasbourg. He is supposedly, we signed him from Atlanta. I don't know too much about him other than the fact that he was included in the Paris Olympics team. He's obviously young. He's obviously looked at as an understudy, similar to kind of how we've got Malo Gusto under Reece James. I feel like he is going to be the understudy to Cucurella on that left side, and fingers crossed it's a good signing for Strasbourg. I hope he plays. I hope he does well. But fingers crossed it's one of those where he gets one season under his belt and he's ready to kind of come in to that team next season and do the bit part role like Gusto did so well last season. But another player, and the final player on the list that has gone to Strasbourg, who I might have to do another episode about, because Andrey Santos, he spent the second half of last season at Strasbourg after obviously a torrid time at Nottingham Forest, helped him avoid relegation. I think it was 11 League One appearances. this season he's played 2 games, scored 2 goals. He looks like the talisman, bro. Andrey Santos looks like that guy. And I don't want to entertain the idea, but if Romeo Lavia does not sort his injury issues out, if Romeo Lavia's injury issues, do not sort themselves out by the end of the season, and we are still looking at a bit part player in Lavia. Look, I love the guy. I think he's absolutely class, but we have 4 or 5 players that are ready to jump in and take that spot. Cesare Casadei, one that they were looking at potentially getting a permanent move for this year. But I think Andrey Santos is one that is still firmly in the plans for Chelsea. He's a player I was very, very excited when we signed him from Vasco. I thought he was, from what I'd seen, just the comps and clips, fantastic player. I think the maturity on the head on his shoulders is 20, 30 years older than his feet. He has the athleticism of a kid, but he's got the footballing brain and the footballing knowledge of a maestro, a midfield maestro, someone that's been doing it for 20 years. I think he's such a great player, and I really, I'm going to be watching him very closely this year. He's another one that I've got big hopes for at Chelsea. Another midfielder who I'm not surprised he went out on loan. I think he probably could have stayed at the club for depth, to be honest, is Leslie Ugochukwu, who obviously went to Southampton in the Premier League. I think he's probably on the list. He's the one I'm probably most surprised about in terms of when you look at our depth, when you look at the players that we have available to us, and also what they're getting out of the loan. I don't see him starting much at Southampton, to be honest. I mean, I know he's capable and a great player, and I think he will get minutes, particularly in the cup games. And I think, fingers crossed he proves himself and gets more game time further down the season. But yeah, to me, it was a little bit of a mismatch. I didn't think it was really necessary. I feel like, though, maybe Enzo Maresca feels he has players like Renato Vega and like Caicedo who can do kind of more of a hybrid role a bit better, whereas Ugochukwu is kind of just stuck in that central defensive midfield role. Who knows? But yeah, obviously in the Premier League, so we can keep a fairly close eye on how he gets on this season. And, well, before we go on to the final, well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about the Premier League ones first, because there's only 3 more players to discuss. So the first one is Armando Broja, Everton. He's gone on loan with a 30 mil option to buy. No obligation, and it's an option. They ain't taking that option, Brev. There's no fee, and Chelsea have agreed to pay his salary till he's fit because he's injured. I don't see him being fit and available until November. So already half the season's down the drain. I don't see anybody paying 30 mil for Broja. I think Ipswich would have been an ideal move. Obligation if they stay up, because I think they will stay up regardless of whether they sign him or not. I think Delat, Hutchinson, they've got some fantastic players, Ipswich. But yeah, I can't see that 30 mil option being triggered. Fingers crossed though. Prove me wrong, Armando, because Broja's a player that I've had so much hope and so much stock in for so long. I think, and I'll say it again, I still think he's got all the tools needed to be a top striker. But he just hasn't happened for him. The timings, the injuries, the competition at Chelsea. It's a very, very difficult situation if you aren't 100% fit all of the time. And yeah, he's a player that I've grown up watching through the academy, and from his loan move to Southampton, Vitesse, I know this guy can score. I know this guy can do it at the top level. But I just don't see him staying fit long enough to do it effectively for a team, unfortunately. So fingers crossed I don't want him to rush back from injury, but fingers crossed he is back on the pitch before Christmas. The sooner that he's fit, the sooner that we can stop paying his salary, but also the sooner he can make an impact on this Everton team, and fingers crossed trigger that 30 mil buy option. Now the penultimate one is another player that I'm quite confused as to why this has happened. Raheem Sterling to Arsenal on loan. Now, the only reason that I can see in my mind is that they think that he will they think he'll do well and boost his value, and we'll be able to sell him in the summer. But why you would send one of your most experienced attacking player to not a title rival, to a rival who is trying to win the title? We have helped them, no doubt. We've boosted them. We've given them more depth. Like, look at their injury concerns this weekend in the North London derby. He'll probably feature because they've got whoever they haven't got. Who is it? Jesus? No, he's fit. Odegaard. That's the one player that's injured. So they will probably give him some minutes this weekend. But the thing that gets my goat is we're paying his salary. There's no loan. There's no buy option, no buy obligation. They've got no risk. They've taken absolutely nothing of the risk, and we're paying his wages. That's the only reason I don't like this transfer. But every Arsenal fan that's laughed at me, and every Arsenal fan that said something in the office, said something on social media, said something to my face, give it 2 weeks. I guarantee you will hate this guy more than me. You understand why we're not that concerned, why we didn't care that he went to you. And yes, I don't like the financial aspects of the deal, but I couldn't give less of a fuck that he went to Arsenal, because he's not improving your team. He's not a step up on Trossard. He's not a step up on Martinelli. He's not a step up on Saka, who's shit. Give it 2-3 weeks. I reckon he might have a good game in the North London derby. He might have a good couple of first games, but give it 2 weeks, man. If you watch Raheem Sterling for 90 minutes, he'll do 80% of it right, and then the 20% of it that he should be doing right, it'll get fucked. So just wait. All you Arsenal fans laughing and rubbing it in, wait. You'll see. It's like telling us that Havertz has improved. It's the same fucking player that was playing that we were whinging at week in, week out. You're taking our scraps yet again. Only this time they've got away with not paying his wages, and that I've got to give Edu credit for. But the final loanee of this, the final loanee and the final player that we're going to discuss on this week's episode, Leo Castledine, akin to Ronnie Stutter, another player that I am very, very keen on keeping a close eye on this year. He scored just 22 minutes into his debut. He's at Shrewsbury Town in League One. Be interesting if he comes up against Ronnie when they play Burton Albion. Leo Castledine is an attacking midfielder who can do it all. He is what we thought Mason Mount was. He is what we thought Gallagher was. I promise you, Leo Castledine, I would be surprised if he makes it to this Chelsea team just because of the nature of the business with Bowley, Clearlake, etc. now. But he's a player that I have said no doubt he can make it. No doubt he's got the quality. I wanted him to be in the team last year, even for a couple of cup games. I want him to get the minutes and want him to get the opportunities because I think he is a baller. Both him and Ronnie Stutter, remember these names. Leo Castledine and Ronnie Stutter, remember these names. Both of these boys will be top players. They're both in League One. Both going to be fairly readily available for us to watch. Hopefully I'll be able to get down to a couple of games, if they play some games fairly close to me, I'm going to try and get down and see these boys in the flesh because they are stars in the making. Leo Castledine, I have no doubt, whether he makes it for Chelsea, whether he makes it for someone else, Leo Castledine will be a baller. And that seems as apt a place as any to wrap this week's episode up. But yeah, we will be back tomorrow for a live match reaction, possibly a preview as well on this channel. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to drop us a like and a comment as well if you haven't already. But yeah, every single week we'll be bringing you an episode, a more condensed episode of Loan Watch, letting you know just how these players are progressing. But yeah, make sure to follow @2Blues Podcast on the Instagram, TikTok, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll see you tomorrow.